Oh, welcome everybody to the Sunday afternoon UK Sangha call. And today is the 22nd of February. So today I'm doing the UK Sangha call again. So I kind of talked with Mikey and indirectly with Dhammarato. So we'll see if we can do it like as a bi-weekly thing. So every 2 weeks, depending on the availability of internet, as you can see, which is not always great when you're staying in the wilderness. The wilderness is great for many, many things, but internet reception, maybe not one of those. So, yeah, before we started the call, Ivan had a really good question and something that has been on my mind quite a bit lately that I've been really playing around with. And that is the Pali concept of Yoniso Manisakara. And I might not be pronouncing that correctly, but we'll just go with it. So the translation for Yoniso Manisakara is wise attention. And it's the second factor of the seven factors of enlightenment. So first we have sati, and then when we have sati, then we can keep in mind to investigate with wisdom what is going on in our experience. And Ivan also mentioned another factor, which is curiosity. So curiosity is something that's very closely related to wise attention. And we could kind of give it other names like, um, yeah, having a sense of interest, having a sense of playfulness, also has that sense of curiosity with it. And yeah, so for the Four Noble Truths, yeah, each noble truth has a different task to it. And for the first noble truth, it would be to comprehend or, yeah, kind of take to heart what is dukkha and what is not dukkha. Now, what I ran into when I first started practicing, and it took me a long, long time to really understand this, is that just asking the questions about what is dukkha and what is not dukkha does bring up that quality of investigation, that quality of interest and curiosity and investigation. It does do that sometimes, but not always. And so, for example, we can ask ourselves, like, is this dukkha over and over and over again? And in the beginning, it might really work. We might really take it to heart and really feel like, oh, when we ask ourselves that question, then yeah, we really comprehend what is dukkha and what is not dukkha. And in the beginning, I would do that, and then sometimes it would really, yeah, it would really, hit home, and I would really feel like I would be properly investigating it, really taking to heart what is dukkha and what is not, and then being able to come out of dukkha. But what I later found out, um, and of course this has been told to me many times before, but I just want to emphasize this, is that we have to keep it fresh. So when you are using a certain question, like, is this dukkha or is this not dukkha? Then you also want to investigate, you want to be curious, you want to have that sense of interest that is this question that I'm asking, is this still helping me to really see the First Noble Truth? Or is it losing its freshness? Is it starting to become more like a ritual? So, yeah, while you are investigating, you have to keep track of that. And when you notice that it's starting to lose its freshness, can you then rephrase that question in a different way? So here are some of the ways that I really like to investigate the First Noble Truth. So first of all, yeah, we of course have like, is this dukkha or is this not dukkha? That's one of the ways of doing it. And then another way that I really like to do it is something that Ajahn Sumedho uses. And he is or was the abbot of Amaravati, and who kind of like brought Thai Buddhism, to England. Of course, it had already kind of been there, but not on the scale that it is now. So the phrase that he likes to use is, or kind of the pointer that he likes to use is, to notice the space around the thought. And basically, what we do when we start noticing the space around the thought, and I would like for all of you who are listening to start doing this during this talk, is that we kind of stand back from the thought. And by noticing the space around it, by using that pointer, yeah, it's not right in front of us. So we can kind of get like a panoramic view. We can see it from a really neutral, from a really balanced position. So that is one way to really start to know that if what you are doing is worth holding on to or caring about or not. And
For Daniel, would you mind
mhm.
giving an example of seeing space around a thought?
Yeah, so the best way to understand, what is meant by that is really to practice that. But yeah, I think the only way I can kind of describe it is that you kind of stand back from it. Mm. So when we are identified with our thoughts, it kind of feels like they are right up in our face, like they take over our whole experience of the present moment. But when you notice the space around the thought, that kind of means that you are automatically paying attention also to other things. And that kind of helps you to decouple, as it were, from the thought that you are experiencing. Yeah, so I recommend you to kind of play around with it and just see what happens when you have that intention in mind. So so another way of seeing the First Noble Truth would be, instead of asking a question or noticing the space around the thought, would be to take the phrase of the Buddha that nothing is worth clinging to or caring about as I am your mind. You can just, think nothing is worth caring about, and assuming that. So um, instead of taking it as something that has to be kind of proven, um, which might sound contradictory, but you can really try this for yourself. You just kind of assume that things are not worth caring about as I am your mind, and just see what that does to your mind when you do that. So yeah, so all of these things we really have to, investigate and experience for ourselves to see how it affects our mind. And I think the most important thing, with the first noble truth is to really keep switching it up when it starts to become a ritual. So yeah, so keep, and this also is, about investigating noble truth number 4 is to see if your investigation of the first noble truth is still fresh. So other ways we can phrase the first noble truth would be: is this stressful? Is this worth depending upon? Is this worth relying upon? Is it a sure thing? Ajahn Chah used to love the phrase "not sure." Everything is not sure. So yeah, so we can keep switching it up. And what I also like about the first noble truth is that, you know, hearing about the Dhamma and talking about the Dhamma with others is one of the ways to really get insight into the first noble truth, because then you hear how other people investigate that first noble truth, and that can give you also like a fresh perspective. So that's why these Sangha calls are so helpful to hear each other's perspective. So so that is a bit about the first noble truth. And the second noble truth, of course, is about the abandoning. So then, yeah, it's just about the right effort, and so I won't really go into that in this call, because I think that might be better for another time. But then we can also take a look at the third noble truth, and yeah, so this is about the cessation of dukkha. And this is a really interesting one, because at first you might think like, oh, the cessation of suffering, oh, that's all great. Like, what's there to investigate? Like, we've arrived. But actually, what tends to happen is that as soon as we become free from dukkha, then the first thing that happens is that we get bored with it. Because that is just our old dukkha starting up again. So what we want to do with the third noble truth is that as soon as we get some freedom from dukkha, we kind of want to pay really close attention to the fact that we are free from dukkha. So how can we do that? How can we really take it to heart? That is how the Buddha describes the third noble truth as the task or the duty that has to be done in regard to the third noble truth, is that we have to take it to heart. So one way we can do that, and this is something I got from also from Ajahn Sumedho and from Ajahn Amaro, is that they give the example of, let's say you walk into an empty room, and maybe the empty room could be, for example, a bathroom. Let's say you're at a party at someone's house, and it's a great party and everybody's having a good time. There's a lot of music going on, a lot of socializing, and you're feeling actually pretty good. And then you walk into the bathroom, and even the music even the socializing kind of stops, and all that you have there in the bathroom is silence. Oh, and you can just sit on the toilet. You can just really take the time to chill out. So I remember, being at parties before before I was ordained, and I always liked it when I had like a moment to myself, at a party where you're in the bathroom and you have a little bit of silence, like you're having a lot of fun out in the party, but now it kind of it has all kind of died down, and you can just really enjoy the silence. So that silence is kind of something that we want to open our heart to. So the third noble truth is all about training the heart to really appreciate the silence and the freedom from dukkha, and to you know to actually kind of enjoy the fact that or appreciate the fact that we are bored, and change the fact or change our attitude about that. So when you see that your dukkha has gone away, but now you're starting to get bored, can you change your attitude? Oh, I'm bored right now. That means that I've got really no problem. So then you can kind of start to count your blessings, and, count your blessings about all the things that you don't have to do. Like, for example, you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to do anything. Maybe you're by yourself. You don't have to socialize with anybody right now. You can just, you can just breathe quietly and do your thing. And yeah, so this is how we can start to really take it to heart. But another thing that I would uh, recommend to do is to give yourself something to do, something to play around with when you get to that state. Um, for example, you can start playing around with the breath in a way that requires really careful attention. And yeah, you can all give it a try right now. I'm not sure if we did this last time, but we're gonna give it a go again anyway. Um, is that when your mind is really still, but it gets bored? Is basically it needs something to do. It needs something to put its energy into. So you can play around with the breath, going from the top of the head down to your feet, and then back up again. So the way you want to do that is that on the in breath, notice any sensations related to the breath at the top of the head. So it doesn't have to be actually physically connected, in the sense of like literally feeling the air going into your nose and then into your throat and then down to your lungs, etc. So it's just like you feel the in breath, and okay, what kind of sensations do you feel connected to the in breath at the top of that? And then as you are breathing in, and you want to make it a very comfortable breath, you start to follow the breath going down at its own pace. So you don't have to synchronize, for example, one in breath to, let's say, going all the way down the body. So maybe on your first in breath, you will get from the top of the head, and you will kind of follow it down to, let's say, the chest. but it can be also much lower, or it can even be the whole body. The point is, it doesn't matter where you end. You just let the breath um, go at its own pace. And then when your in breath ends, you are aware also of the break in between. And then on the out breath, you continue going down until you are all the way at the feet. And then you go back up again and you just continue this process. Now, what might happen is that you start to feel that your breath kind of gets stuck in one place. For example, there might be some tension, let's say in the throat or in the chest or in some other place. For some reason, it just gets stuck. And what you don't want to do is you can start to imagine the space element. So at that place where the breath gets stuck, just remind yourself, and you can kind of use your imagination, that it's just atoms there, and atoms are mostly made out of space. So really, there is nothing to resist the breathing. And if you keep that in mind at that point, then that can help let the breath flow again. What you can also take note of is maybe you're trying too hard to make the breath do something. So then you can change your attitude like, okay, let's care just enough, not too much, just enough to play around with it. Just really enjoying it and kind of entertaining yourself and having fun with it. Or what might happen is that all of a sudden, as you are following the breath, and let's say it's in the throat, then all of a sudden you start to feel it in the hands. So, and then you think like, oh no, I was at the throat. I shouldn't be feeling it here, but now I am, and that doesn't feel right. So then you want to also not care too much about it. Just kind of go with the flow and just just play around with it. Just feel what feels natural and go with that. And as you are doing that, practice also keeping awareness of the breath or the breath element, air element throughout the whole body. So this really requires some careful attention. So it's kind of like you have one breath that is like a visitor, which would be the breath that you are following up and down. And then the other breath, the breath that is always present in the body, that is kind of like the breath that lives in your body. So you want to be aware of both. And if you can only be aware of a little bit of the breath throughout the body, or you cannot follow it so clearly, that doesn't matter. It's just that we are training ourselves to really immerse ourselves in the breath. And then when you start to notice that the up and down starts to lose your interest, that means that it is becoming stale. So here again, just as with the first noble truth, now we are investigating with playing this game, we are investigating the fourth noble truth, which we are mm, developing sama samadhi, of course, the whole noble eightfold path. So here we also want to keep the breath really entertaining, really fresh. So going up and down is just one way of playing with it. So now we're going to explore another way, which would be to go from one hand to the other. So you can kind of start with going from the thumb in one hand to the next finger, to the finger after that, to the finger after that, and then to your pinky, and then your whole hand. And in the meantime, you're keeping that awareness of the whole body as much as possible. And you keep having wholesome thoughts about really enjoying the process. And then what you want to do is, what you can play around with is, how can you let the breath move from the hands, let's say the right hand to the left hand? So do you want to gradually crawl up the right arm and like the underarm and then the upper arm and then maybe the shoulder? Or oh, lost you guys there for a second. So what you can also do is first you do the hands, then you start to include the upper arm, then you start to include the upper arm, and then yeah, and then the shoulder, and then through the breastbone, you start to go through to the other arm. So yeah, so you really want to keep track. Like, am I still entertained with this kind of breathing? And there are other variations that you can do. Like you can go from ear to ear, like from the ear to the chin to the other ear. So it's just kind of a way to keep you entertained. So that would be the fourth noble truth in regards to the breath. But also, you know, when we are gladdening the mind, it's also really important to keep it fresh and to not make a ritual out of it. So one of the ways you can investigate the fourth noble truth is also by asking questions about what kind of wholesome thoughts, what kind of thinking would be really, really wholesome right now, really nice. So instead of like just taking the first thing that comes up and using that to gladden the mind, you actually sometimes want to take maybe a bit more time to reflect on what would be really wholesome. Does anybody have any questions, by the way? I've been rambling on for already half an hour. I forgot to if there's any
Uh,
question.
yeah, thanks very much for Daniel. It was really nice. Um, so I really liked, especially when you were talking about this idea that, like, instead of trying to prove that nothing that is I, me, or mine is worth caring about, we can just assume
Mhm.
it and go from there, and reverse engineer
Yeah.
it. um, but a question I have is, so with this kind of breath visualization kind of thing, I kind of struggle to understand, like when you're talking about feeling the breath moving from like your hand to your other hand or something like that. Like when I breathe, I just really feel it in my lungs and like my nose and stuff. So is it kind of more like imagining that you're feeling it there?
Okay, so it's more about, it's not actually about feeling the breath, but more about connecting the breath to what's going on in that part of the body. So, for example, let's say right now, pay attention to your right hand
Okay.
and take a deep in breath.
Okay.
And notice that when you are breathing in, you start to feel all sorts of sensations, probably on the skin. And then when you stop breathing, you also stop feeling probably those, stop feeling those sensations. And then
That's
again,
pretty
when you
weird,
start,
man.
so you can notice it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
like when I
So
was sorry,
uh,
when you're
go for
talking
it.
about with this exercise with in the in breath, top of the head, and then out breath, feeling this going down the body. That then I felt like this kind of like a I don't know, like kind of warm going down, but I wasn't sure if I was quote unquote doing it right because I wasn't sure if I was like imagining that or if this is something literal. But is that essentially it? Like when you're focusing on this body part and you breathe in, then just seeing what comes up, kind of noticing what comes up.
Exactly. That's it. And
Okay.
actually, the warmth that you feel is
Mm.
something that you can really play around with, and this is called um, the basically the meditation on the elements.
Mm.
And what we are doing here is we are taking the air element and we are basically investigating that. And while you are investigating that, you can also start to notice the other elements. So warmth is very useful in creating comfort, in really relaxing your body, in really getting that sense of safety, security, you know, success, just that piti sukha. And a lot of people, like in other traditions, for example, Bhante Vimalaramsi, with his metta meditation, he really speaks, for example, about feeling that warm glow in the heart. And that is not something exclusive, to his practice. You can really feel that when you're just practicing anapanasati as well. And yeah, so when you are experiencing that warmth, in the top of the head, you can kind of see what you can do with that. Because if you can kind of allow it to spread to other parts of the body, to kind of like go along for the ride with the breath, so to say, then you can actually get that warm glow and spread it everywhere. And, that is one of the ways. Well, actually, that's kind of, what the Buddha is talking about, where in the description of the first jhana, is he's talking about the bath man who has like this bath powder that he sprinkles with water, and so that no water is oozing out, but it's like the whole bath powder is moist, and he makes it into a ball. And then the Buddha says, like, in the same way, we want to spread that sense of ease throughout the whole body. And that is what we are doing, by working with the breath in this way, by learning to play around with it and learning to feel it in the different parts of the body. We can, slowly but surely start to really, spread that sense of ease throughout the whole body in how the Buddha talks about it in the first jhana. And so, the breath is really good for that. And here again, it's very useful to keep it fresh. So sometimes you want to, or actually most of the time, I would say you want to use the air element or the breath. But sometimes it can be really, really pleasurable to kind of imagine, for example, that on the in breath, the air is mixing with heat as it comes into the body. Mm. Yeah, for myself, I kind of like to imagine, so not really visualize, but more like imagine as in a sense having an idea with what you're doing. That yeah, this air element and this heat element or fire element as it's called, it's kind of like circling around each other as it's coming into the body as I'm inhaling. And then as it goes down the throat, I imagine it spreading in all directions, through my arms, through my legs, just kind of everywhere. And I allow that to happen. I do it in a really, really easy way without trying to push it around. So here you can, for example, ask yourself, like, okay, what elements would be really useful right now? For example, the earth element is very grounding. So the earth element represents solidity in the body. So, for example, when you are inhaling, you can imagine the breath mixing with the earth element and that then spreading throughout the body so that you become aware of all things in the body that feel kind of dense or solid. So actually let's try that right now. So everybody can take a deep in breath, and as you take that deep in breath, you can kind of imagine the air going to everything in your body that feels solid. So the air that's coming in is helping you become aware of what is solid in the body. So as I'm doing this myself, I can already, right away tell that it's, yeah, it feels really nice to breathe in that way, in that it can really kind of ground you in the present moment. So situations where I like to use this is, for example, when I'm feeling very restless. When I'm feeling anxious about something, um, or maybe it can be that you are very elated. Mm. So you're very, very excited about something, and it's starting to kind of become starting to turn into restlessness, then that can also be very helpful. And then, so the space element, we already talked about. That is very helpful for letting the breath flow freely throughout the body. If you notice that the breath won't flow easily somewhere, then you can use that. And then the water element, we can do that right now, is when you breathe in, pay attention to the breath going from the nose to the throat, and then, for example, to the heart, and from there going through all your, throughout your blood, like through all your arteries. And in the beginning, for example, you can kind of pay attention to the big aortas, like the big ones in the legs, the arms, or just circulating around the torso. And if you can notice that clearly, then you can start to go into more detail until it covers your whole body. So here also, it's not that we are trying to be physically accurate with these kind of elements. So it's just a way to give rise to certain sensations in the body, and then we use those to keep ourselves in the present moment. So that is, about the elements. Does anybody have any more questions?
I just wanted to add, Daniel, that I really
Mhm.
like how you frame these kind of practices as kind of a helpful game rather than something that is
Mhm.
very serious and very like you got to get it right and you got to in the past when I've uh, tried these kind of guided meditation things, and this was before I started practicing Dhamma, but uh, then it always felt like, oh, I need to get it right. I need to visualize things in this correct way. But I really like how you frame it as more of this playful kind of thing that, you just play around with it and see what works and what feels good. And yeah, I really appreciate that.
For sure, that's very important. And I really, recommend you to investigate, when you're investigating that first noble truth. Also, in regards to the body, for example, you notice that there is some tension in the body, or there is something unpleasant in the body, then you can kind of think about it like, okay, what kind of breathing, what kind of element, or what kind of perception, all those kind of things, what would really help with that? And you can really come up like with your own creative ways of doing it. I've heard the strangest things, like for example, breathing like a jellyfish. And I've tried it, and I can tell you it really works. So, and the thing is, that when when these insights, or this kind of experimentation comes from your own insights, then you start to really learn about cause and effect. Within the mind. That's when you really learn how the mind works, because you're playing around with the causes, and you're seeing what kind of effect that has. So it's not just learning about the body, but it's also really learning about the mind. you learn to deal with, all sorts of like unwholesome mental states, like even like greed, doubt, restlessness, just everything. So
And
yeah, definitely play around with it. Go ahead, Jonas.
yeah, I was wondering, you might have said that earlier, about why are we actually practicing this kind of breath awareness or visualization? I heard you say earlier that it's kind of, or the breath is can be something that can really like take us back to the present moment. But why are we going like so deep into a kind of visualization? Like for example, what you said, noticing how the breath flows through our blood, the bloodstream, let's say. Like, what is the
Yeah,
purpose behind it?
that's a really good question. So actually, that is also what we want to investigate. I'm glad you brought that up. Is that when we investigate the the noble truths, the first thing that we have to investigate is how much investigation do we actually need? Because if we already have awareness of the whole body, and if the whole body is already comfortable, then all we have to do is just pay attention to the whole body and enjoy it, and relax. So these are more like kind of ways to deal with, specific well, issues. I'm not sure if I would use that word. Um, it's a way of gladdening the mind, actually. So let's say you are using whole body breathing. You are paying attention to the entire skin, and you're just staying with that. You're not doing anything else. You're just paying attention to the skin as you breathe in and as you breathe out, and you're just gladdening the mind. You're observing the mind, and doing it like that. Well, maybe at some point you start to feel that your interest in the body, is starting to collapse. So the paying attention to the entire skin of the body, feeling the breath there, it's not as interesting anymore. That's the time to switch it up. So your investigation should first of all be, how do I actually need to investigate the body right now, or is it already okay? And can I just keep track of it to see if anything changes? Um, and what I would
So is
also
it?
say is that, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was just remembering something that I think Dhammarato said at some point. It's just like like investigating just to the extent necessary to to kind of experience first jhana or get into first jhana. Just is okay right now, and it's good enough. That's what I mean, because what I like from my point of view, when I say, let's say, sit down to just do some breathing, I really enjoy when it just comes to the point of, oh, there's actually nothing I have to do right now, not even going to the effort of like visualizing my breath flowing. And I feel like a lot of times this is, you know, what I mean by just the extent necessary of like seeing the thoughts that come up, for example, or feelings, and looking at whether they are unwholesome or wholesome, and changing them if they are unwholesome. And um, um, well, I'm trying to understand a bit what the purpose behind really like looking at that breath so intently is in going to first jhana.
So the way you can look at it is that, yeah, we do need um, the appropriate amount of investigation. So in that sense, I kind of started, maybe in a situation where a lot of investigation is needed. But this is certainly going to be only part of the time. For example, when I am doing Anapanasati, then most commonly I will just be paying attention, to the whole body. Um, and I'm not, and I'm not usually playing around with it that much. But there are a lot of situations where I do need this kind of, playing around. And, as I said, like, for example, restlessness is a situation where it's very, very useful to give your mind something to do with regards to the body, because that's going to keep it very grounded in the present moment. Because if you are, if you are restless and you are just kind of, breathing in long, and but you're not really you're not really doing anything with the breath, then you're probably gonna like continuously lose track of it over and over and over and over again. And there's different ways of dealing with restlessness. You can also, approach it more from the mind and just deal it. So actually, you kind of need to deal with it through the body and the mind. But just by dealing with it through the mind, you can also deal with restlessness. But I feel that this combined approach of dealing with it through the body and through the mind, is the most effective. So
Okay, so
yeah,
it's like a tool, right? I got you. Is what Caleb wrote also. Is it Caleb? No, Oz wrote about. It's a good tool to have for like, especially some of the hindrances like boredom and restlessness, to give the mind something to kind of play with in the present moment.
exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
So what I would also, like to mention is that when you reflect, like how much investigation do I need, you also want to look at where is the dukkha mostly coming from. Is it mostly in the body, or is it mostly in the mind, or is it both? So if the body is very comfortable, but the mind is not, then you don't want to do as much, with the breathing, or maybe you just use it as kind of like a tool to help with mainly your investigation of the mind. But if your mind is really, really calm, really wholesome, but your body is not, then you really want to investigate the body. So it's gonna depend. It's gonna depend on the situation. And about investigation and about interest, I want to move around away from the breath for a bit and talk about the simile of the fire. Of course, we have many similes of the fire, but this one is talking about the 7 factors of enlightenment. And in this sutta, the Buddha says, like, okay, sati is useful everywhere, but the other 6 factors of enlightenment, you want to emphasize some of them at different points. So, when we say, when I say, okay, the first thing you have to do is to investigate how much investigation do I need, you also want to take a look at how clearly can I see right now. For example, their mind is obsessed, then you should first have it stop being obsessed. And then you can start to have that applied and sustained thought, or directed and evaluating thought, however you want to call it. So that is something that I found also very useful, because in the past I would pretty much always be investigating, even when my mind would be very, very restless or obsessed. So you want to kind of check for yourself, like, if I start investigating right now, like for example, the first noble truth, can I see clearly what is going on or not? And sometimes you won't notice right away, and you kind of have to do the investigation for a bit to see, if your mind is really obsessed or not, and it's not so clear right away. But in that um, in that situation, I found that there's actually a really, really nice way to get your mind to settle down, and that is to basically do almost no investigation at all, but instead you kind of start noting. And when I say noting, I don't mean Mahasi noting, so some of you will be familiar with that, but I mean noting what kind of wholesome quality you want to bring up, um, without really investigating much. Because the Buddha says investigation is kind of like fuel on the fire when you are obsessed. When you are obsessed and you are having an awesome thought, an awesome thought, an awesome thought, an awesome thought, when it's really rapid, 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 rapid. And then you start to look at it like, oh, is this dukkha? But meanwhile, you can just, feel a firestorm coming at you. Basically, then uh, that's actually gonna make it harder to deal with sometimes. So what you can then do instead is that you only with sati, you see what has come up, you just kind of note whatever wholesome quality would help abandon that unwholesome thought. So let's just say you see that you are restless. Relax, relax. And then you are clinging to something, not worth, which would be like, you can use like the three characteristics: not sure, not worth, not my business, whichever is most clear to you at that time. you know not worth, not sure, never mind, start again, relax, relax. So what you are doing is you are cultivating the three qualities that the Buddha says help pull you out of restlessness, which would be upekkha, or as Dhammarato calls it, dynamic balance. And then the second one would be sukha, which would be comfort. And the way that you create that comfort And that dynamic balance is that as soon as you see that unskillful quality come up, you just note whatever it is, whatever quality you need to develop to abandon that. But other than that, you don't investigate it. So you don't give it any more attention than needed. Because when something has a lot of energy, when that restlessness has a lot of energy, then it will kind of like suck you in if you start investigating it. Oh, and then the third quality is directed thought or applied thought, samadhi, as it is that in the sutta, which is to come back, to the present moment, to the body, to really keep you in the present moment. So this is something I highly recommend to play around with. And so to then, it can feel a bit counterintuitive, but then to actually not investigate, only very, very little you can do. Like, for example, you can just make the breath a bit comfortable, like that. And you just keep track of like, am I still restless? Or can I start doing a bit more investigation again? And then the opposite is also true, that when your mind is sluggish, then you actually really want to pay attention to the investigation. You really want to investigate the body. That's when these, playing with the elements, playing with the breath, all these kind of games you can do. That's what really helps to create that sense of involvement, engagement, entertainment, with the Four Noble Truths. That's really what helps to get the ball rolling. So that's how you can use investigation kind of as fuel, as rocket fuel. So you want to use it just in the right amount to get your motor started and running smoothly. If you use too much investigation, you're gonna get really, really restless. So does anybody have any questions about that or anything else we have talked about?
It reminds me a bit of, when you say when the mind is super restless and it's coming rapid fire, it's like it's like if someone in the street is trying to argue with you and yelling at you, and it's not really worth like arguing back. Better just to walk away. It's kind of like that with, if I'm understanding correctly, with when it's these rapid fire and wholesome thoughts and you're super restless, maybe better just to just take some breaths and just relax a bit rather than trying to kind of engage with those unwholesome thoughts.
Exactly.
Give it some space.
You 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 really can't talk any sense or reason into anyone who's really arguing or who's really emotionally charged. So yeah, that analogy or metaphor, of seeing on someone on the street is that's exactly the way it is with your own mind. So just as when someone is having a panic attack, you really get them to focus on the body and to come back into the present moment. And then when they are in the present moment, then you can start to talk some sense into them that they are actually not in danger. So yeah, that's a good metaphor you had. Amit, what do you think?
Yeah, Daniel, thanks a lot. It was really, really great talk. I would like to add one other practice I learned actually from Gary Weber. He's not a Buddhist monk, but he has some good insights. So he called it
Mhm.
a Sedona method. I think he's not the developer of it, but I think the way it works is when, for instance, I am restless, so I ask myself a question, and these are like three questions. The first question is, could I let go of this restlessness? Right? Answer could be yes or no, depending on how heavy or big it is. And the second question then I ask is, when would I let it go? So the first is, could I let it go, and the second is, would I let it go? And usually the answer here is yes. And the third question is when, right? And usually for me the answer is now. And then you kind of keep repeating these questions. And this is something I find useful in my practice. I think it's for restlessness, but also for other unwholesome qualities of mind. So you're just framing it a bit differently.
That sounds interesting, and I'm gonna put it to the test and see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. Let me know how it goes.
Yeah. Thank you for your input. So
I have a question.
Timo, go ahead.
Um, so how can we bring this across like our daily activities or daily duties? Like, I understand that we can do this with our breath, while seated and even while we're relatively uninvolved with our outward life. But like, do you have any tips? Like, let's say somebody's just doing chores. How can they apply these same concepts, to the act of doing chores? Does that make sense?
For sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what I would recommend with that is, especially when you're walking, let's say for example, you're out in the city, or speaking as a monk, like I have to like mop the floor or sweep some leaves. What I like to do is I imagine the breathing coming out from the ground and then going up the legs and then going all the way up the body, and just keep refreshing that whole body awareness that way. And when you do it in this way, it tends to stick longer than, for example, when you're just paying attention to the bottom of the feet or just the feet and the hands. Because I feel that, movement is especially like entertaining or interesting to the mind. And I think that's also a part of the reason why Dhammarato has us like chase the breathing, because that movement just really, gives you something to do. And yeah, so that's, for the breathing. And for the mind, I feel like what I notice with myself is that we try to keep our practice just as good as when we're, sitting on the cushion. Mm. So when you're doing chores or you're working, or you're doing anything that requires, some thinking, mm, anything complex, then yeah, you really want to pay attention to really celebrating, every moment that you wake up. and every in breath and every out breath that you can recollect. For example, with that feeling the breath, coming up the body and going up to the top of the body. If you can do that one time, and then you really want to celebrate it, and I would say like really keep it simple and keep appreciating those simple acts of waking up and playing with the breath a little bit. That has been what's most helpful for me. And another thing about about celebrating that is that when your mind is not immersed in the present moment, then the Buddha recommends investigation, success, and virya, or like right effort. That's kind of what you want to remember, that those three qualities are what's are going to give you the most immersion when you're when you're sluggish. So what you can also investigate with regards to the fourth noble truth is keep asking yourself the right questions. Like, what can I do with my awareness that's going to really capture my attention? Those are kind of the questions you want to ask. And how can I create that whole body awareness? How can I make my body like an antenna? And for the pity, for the success, how much attention should I should I pay to that right now? Because sometimes you only need a little bit of success to keep going, and other times, you really need to hype yourself up. So you want to become your own team captain and your own hype man. And I know Dhammarato loves James Brown, and so James Brown is a good example, but actually he has a hype man that always goes with him on tour, who kind of introduces him, when he was on tour, and he would be like, "Oh, the man, the myth, the legend, soul brother number one, James Brown." So maybe you can call yourself the Anapanasati brother number one, and make it as elaborate. Make it as elaborate as it needs to be. So investigate also for yourself, like how elaborate do I need to be with that pity to bring up that quality. Because if you always just have the same thought over and over again, like I got this, or I'm the man, sometimes that's going to be enough. But sometimes you're going to need a bit more than that. So you want to learn to be really, really sensitive to that. Oh, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Right. So, anybody, any comments? Any more questions? Timo, what
Just
did you
kind of.
think? Go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead, Timo.
Yeah, it was awesome. The only thing I'm wondering sometimes lately is when we're doing that kind of stuff, playing around like that, you're always engaging the imaginative faculty of the mind, like seeing the body and so on. With your eyes closed, you make up these pictures, like these structures and so on. It's something different than the sensation itself. So you have the sensation and you make something out of it, like an imaginary image. Here it's glowing, there it's solid, whatever, stuff like that. At least in my experience, uh, it's like that. And then when you see it, you can maybe sometimes let go of that. Like, why am I doing even this? Like, why don't I let go of this kind of fabrication? Like, why do I have to make something out of it to get into it? Why can I just see it even more directly for what it is without any molding and so on, without any or that much of directing also, like it's something different. We're just looking and that stuff comes up, like the shoulder, like you said before, instead of like saying, okay, now I'm gonna go down, now I'm gonna go up and stuff like that. So the question is that going too far with the investigation, or should we just like stay on, like don't deconstruct too much, let's just stay here, be happy and so on.
So, good question. And as for the fabrication, you can kind of see it as pouring concrete. So, when we are using fabrication, it's kind of like we are using, for example, wooden planks to make like a mold for the concrete to pour into. But we have to keep that mold there. And then when we have the concrete in, we have to keep that mold to allow the concrete to harden. And then eventually, when the concrete is hard, then we can take away the molds. And then the concrete will stay in place, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
So, yeah, what I really want to emphasize, when I'm talking about the breath in this way, is that it's not a visualization. It's more like, we use perception, which are like these flashing images. For example, what Dhammarato uses is talking about a tree. So everybody imagine a tree right now. I'll ask you that question. If everybody can do that right now, then we will all come up, with a different kind of tree. And so it's not like we are really focusing on or really actively intently visualizing a tree and trying to kind of like lay that over our experience. It's more like something very transparent, like a transparent imagine over what you are doing. So it's very, very light, and you want to use it as sparsely as possible. And you are absolutely right. So we want to use this fabrication only as much as is necessary. And when we start to notice that, oh, we actually don't need to use it anymore, then we just let it drop away. And then we can just stay in the present moment. So when you notice that the way you are talking to yourself, the way you are breathing, and the mental labels, the perceptions that you are, keeping in mind, when you notice that those are really easily keeping you in the present moment, then that's and keeping you happy, then that's appropriate. And actually, another way to talk about it is that when Dhammarato talks about James Brown, like doing the James Brown meditation, then you also kind of imagine something along with that. You don't just say the words like, I feel good. Yeah, maybe you do. But, you know, there's a certain attitude, a certain imagination that you use when you change your attitudes. Like it means something to you. So it's the same thing, really, that we are doing with the body, just in a slightly different way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Great. I think someone had a question just before you. Was it Oz or Caleb? I'm not sure.
Yeah. It was me. So, just going off of Caleb's question about how we can keep this practice up, off of the pillow.
Mhm.
Something I was wondering about is if you have any tips on keeping this up when like when with other people. I find it quite difficult when I'm, around lots of people and I'm engaged in conversation with them and I'm talking to people and hanging out with people. I think that's when I struggle most to kind of stay aware of these things. And I in those moments, it's much easier that I get wrapped up in like stress or in like, um, maybe I will start to debate something, or maybe I will start to feel kind of restless, or I find that these kind of unwholesome thoughts come up a lot easier when I'm um, like out in the world discussing things with people and hanging out with people. So I was wondering if you had any advice on kind of keeping the practice going there.
I would say that you really have to be aware of your standards when you are socializing, especially like in regards to the Dhamma, because oftentimes when we are socializing, we are kind of aware that it's difficult. Well, it depends on the attitude, of course, but we know it's challenging. Let's put it like that. To to really keep that sati going as we are socializing, and then we tend to maybe try harder to be really present, or we start to really cling to the Dhamma, basically, because we want to have the same standards as when we are, or we want to have the same kind of practice as when we're not socializing. So so the important thing is to really focus, or really appreciate the moments of waking up, and keep it really small, and keep celebrating those small victories, and then that can kind of snowball into something bigger. So if you notice that you are a bit overwhelmed, like your sati is overwhelmed, then, and this is not only when socializing, but this this is really like general advice for practice is, yeah, when you're overwhelmed, just make the practice as simple as possible. Like think to yourself like, okay, what is the simplest thing I can do comfortably in the practice right now? So maybe that will be just celebrating and really, really celebrating every moment that you wake up and every moment that you remember to take an in-breath with sati or an out-breath with sati. Or, just being aware of what's going on. And then by becoming comfortable with those kind of small things in the social situations, then that can snowball into something bigger. But the thing is, like when we are under stress, then we start to really cling to it, and and that's what makes it difficult. So that would be my advice.
Thank you.
Sure. So we've been going on for an hour and a half now. So thank you, everybody. And I'll give the word to Mikey.
Yes, y'all are welcome to keep on hanging out if you'd like, especially if you joined a little bit later. We can talk about the noble Buddha Dhamma. If you're watching this on YouTube, come join us here on the Dom Friends Discord. You can find a link to join in the YouTube video description. You can also listen to these talks on Spotify, iTunes, and other podcasting platforms. We also invite you guys to check out Dhammarato.com. We have over 1,000 transcripts of Dhammarato's talks. So you can, and also these Sangha calls as well. You can read these calls there on the website. We also invite you to check out OpenSanghaFoundation.org. It has things like Sangha Map, books by Buddhadasa, and talks by Ajahn Dhamma. Yeah, thanks, Phra Daniel, for being here with us today, and thank you, friends, as well. Remember, don't worry, be happy, take care, take it easy.
All right. Thank you, everybody. See you in 2
Thank you.
weeks.
Thank you for Daniel.
Thank you very much, Fra Daniel.
Satu,
Thank you.
satu. Bye bye.
Bye.